Following the Second World War, Moscow had no real interest in Africa until emergent decolonization projects began on the continent in the 1950s and 60s. At that point, the Soviet Union's involvement in Africa was motivated by at least three reasons. First, to gain a strong presence on the continent. Second, to counter and possibly undermine Western Europe and by extension NATO's influence on the continent. And third, to have some influence on African issues. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, Russia's interest in Africa waned. In recent times, however, Russia has begun to renew its initial desire to have a foothold in Africa. A meeting co-hosted by Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, which was held in Sochi, Russia in October 2019, marked the very first Russia-Africa summit. There are opportunities for Russia to deepen its influence in Africa. Let's take a look at a few. All 54 African countries sent representatives to the summit, with 43 heads of state or government in attendance. The summit highlighted Russia's interest to do business in Africa, which President Putin says is worth billions of dollars. Some of these business opportunities range from agriculture, nuclear energy, to mineral extraction. And another reassuring point of note is Putin's pledge that the Kremlin would refrain from political or other influence. Regarding agriculture, Russia has a great opportunity to use agriculture as an inroad to establish strong relations with many African countries through the sale of agricultural machinery and technology. Russia has also become a primary export market for Africa's agricultural products following Russia's sanctions on EU food and agricultural products in the aftermath of the annexation of Crimea. This follows South Africa's exports of fish to Russia, which has equally increased in correlation to Russia's ban on Norwegian salmon and other European seafood. On its part, Russia is now one of the world's leading exporters of grains, and Africa is a ready market for its wheat, poultry, pork, and dairy. So far, Russian agricultural products have increased their presence across several African markets. Under the Soviet Union, Moscow showed support for many anti-colonial movements in Africa, as it was particularly interested in dismantling the influence of Western powers. National liberation movements in Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau benefited from this support. Russian-made AK-47 rifles played a crucial role in many of these movements and remain a major Russian export to African countries. However, Russian interest in these conflicts must go beyond providing arms to various parties. One example of where this shift is needed is in Libya. Currently, Russia backs General Haftar's Libyan National Army, which has also garnered support from Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and France. These backers have repeatedly provided arms, drones, and mercenaries from Russia and Syria, as well as diplomatic cover. However, following the return to normalcy in Libya, Russia requires a change of direction in its engagement with Libya. As part of its attempt at using soft power efforts to get Africa on its side, Moscow, during the Soviet era, used the People's Friendship University of Russia to offer scholarships targeted at international students from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The success of this approach can be seen in some of its graduates, such as Thabo Mbeki, now a former president of South Africa, Guyana's ex-president Bharat Jagdeo, the ex-president of Angola, José Eduardo dos Santos, and many others. Even though Russia's soft power play on the continent has taken a dip, the legacy of the Soviet-era move to get Africans to study there is still quite effective today, as many African students still travel to Russia for education. Also, the People's Friendship University of Russia is said to still have a cooperation agreement with 49 African universities. Following Russia's increasing presence on the continent, what would future relationships with the Kremlin look like? For starters, Ethiopia has been left in the cold by the United States and the African Union, both of whom have sought to investigate and possibly punish the country for alleged war crimes in the war against Tigray. Russian involvement in the conflict would have to be on the Ethiopian side, especially in the provision of diplomatic cover, the likes of which it gave and has been giving Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria at the United Nations Security Council. Furthermore, the deployment of Russian anti-aircraft weapons in the wake of a direct confrontation with Egypt would be crucial to Ethiopia's air defense. The deployment of Russian disinformation campaigns, especially on Egyptian social media, would also be effective should Ethiopia stave off a challenge. Russia should also support the warm relations between Ethiopia and Eritrea so that the logistics center in the latter can be converted into a full military base to replace the military base currently being built in Egypt to forestall the aftermath of a possible war between the two. In the Sahel, the best way to optimize gains would be to rein in the excesses of the Wagner Group, a Russian private military contractor with close links to the Russian government. The Wagner Group currently operates in the Central African Republic as a protection force for President Faustin Touadéra. A clash between the Chadian armed forces and Russian mercenaries in the Chadian village of Bitoye, 25 kilometers from the border with the Central African Republic, left 6 Chadians dead at the end of June 2021. The rebels in northern Chad that the Chadian military has been fighting for a long time were also trained by Russia. As a result, Russia has a bad reputation in Chad. However, the passing of longtime leader Idris Deby brings an opportunity for a reset in relations between the two countries. For other countries in the region, what they need most is sophisticated weapons at affordable prices, which the West is not willing to provide on grounds of human rights ethics. However, in Mali, the groundwork for Russian expansion has already been done, as Colonels Malik Dao and Sadio Kamara, believed to be the chief architects of the August 18 coup d'etat, spent a year in Russia at the Higher Military College in Moscow. Although Colonel Assimi Goïta was trained in the U.S., Russia-Mali ties have been growing recently in the area of arms supply. Furthermore, the public mood in support of the coup favors Russian involvement over what is now seen as France's overbearing influence, which is fueling anti-French sentiments in the country. This is enough grounds to foster relations that go beyond hard power.
The United States cannot afford to remain tethered to policies created in response to a world as it was 20 years ago. We need to meet the threats where they are today. Today, the terrorist threat has metastasized beyond Afghanistan.
The hands-off approach by the U.S. on the African continent under the Trump administration has continued under President Joe Biden. This affords Russia the space to step in by strengthening regional military forces to respond to the threat of Islamist groups across the continent. What Russia stands to gain, aside conflict diamonds and mining rights, is that the political game of numbers required for UN votes in the General Assembly would be brought to bear when required, and might also clean up the country's much maligned image for good measure, while expanding its influence as a serious geopolitical player in affairs beyond Eastern Europe and the Middle East.